Mrs. Collins had lived on Pine Hollow Lane for more than 30 years. She had seen her share of neighborhood drama fires, accidents, even a lost pet or two, but nothing like this. As she knelt beside the little boy, she could see how fragile he looked. His breathing was shallow, almost invisible. His face, red from the sun, was slick with sweat. He wasn't moving, but his tiny fingers twitched now and then, a quiet sign that he was still hanging on. The dog remained next to the boy, tail flat against the ground. He looked from Mrs. Collins to the child, and back again, as if making sure she truly understood what was happening. She reached out a shaky hand and brushed the boy's hair away from his face. It was damp and tangled. His eyes fluttered slightly at her touch, but didn't open. "Yes, sweetheart, you hold on," she whispered. "Help is coming." The woman looked at the dog again, this time with something more than cautions, something like gratitude. She had never thought much of stray animals. In fact, she used to complain when they tipped over her garbage cans. But this one wasn't just another stray. He had done something extraordinary. Within minutes, the sound of sirens broke the silence. A fire truck and ambulance turned onto the street, tires screeching slightly as they pulled up. Paramedics jumped out, rushing to the scene with medical bags and stretchers. The dog barked once and moved slightly closer to the child, placing himself between the boy and the unfamiliar people. "Easy, boy," one of the paramedics said, holding up a hand. "We're here to help." Mrs. Collins stepped in quickly. "He's not dangerous. He's the reason this boy is still alive." One of the responders knelt down and checked the child's pulse. "Severe dehydration," he said quickly. "We need to get fluids in him." No sign of injuries. Another medic opened a bottle of water and dabbed a cool cloth across the boy's neck and forehead. His tiny eyelids fluttered again, and his lips parted slightly. "We've got a pulse. Let's move." The dog stood up and barked again as they carefully lifted the boy onto the stretcher. He tried to follow as they wheeled the stretcher toward the ambulance, but a paramedic gently held out a hand. "Hold on there, buddy. We can't take you with us." The dog let out a soft, low whine. His paws scratched at the pavement as the ambulance doors closed. Mrs. Collins bent down beside him and patted his head, gently stroking his neck. "You did good," she whispered. "You did real good." Neighbors were beginning to emerge now, drawn out by the noise and flashing lights. Some rubbed their eyes in disbelief. Others gasped when they learned what had happened. "A toddler? Who does he belong to?" "That's the same dog we always see by the alley, isn't it?" One woman was already on her phone, pulling up the local neighborhood app. Another began taking photos, not for attention, but to share what she thought others should know, that a stray dog had just saved a child's life. Meanwhile, in a home just a few streets away, Jace's mother was pacing in her kitchen, unaware that the sirens were for her son. Her front door had been open for barely a few minutes that morning. She had only turned her back to answer a call. When she came back, he was gone. She had called the police and reported him missing, but every minute that passed felt like a punch to her heart. She didn't know yet that a guardian had found him, not a person, a dog, a stray no one thought twice about. And out on Pine Hollow Lane, that stray dog sat quietly where the boy had been, tail curled around his feet, watching the ambulance vanish down the road. For now, his job was done, but his story had just begun. The emergency room at Brookdale General was already buzzing with activity when the ambulance carrying little Jace pulled up. Nurses stood ready as the paramedics wheeled the stretcher through the sliding glass doors, their voices calm but urgent. 3-year-old male, one of them reported quickly, unresponsive when found, likely dehydrated, possible sun exposure. Stray dog alerted a civilian who called us. Doctors and nurses swarmed around the boy as they transferred him to a hospital bed. 4 lines were quickly inserted. Cold packs were placed under his arms and neck to bring his body temperature down. The staff worked in a well-practiced rhythm, focused and fast. In the middle of it all, Jace's eyes remained closed, his chest rising and falling in short, shallow breaths. Back on Pine Hollow Lane, Mrs. Collins was still standing near the sidewalk, arms folded tightly across her chest. The stray had not moved far. He sat near the same spot he had found the child, ears flicking at every sound, eyes darting back and forth as if waiting for something or someone. The neighbors had started to leave, going back inside their homes, to tell their families what had happened. But Mrs. Collins stayed. She looked down at the dog again, this time really seeing him. His paws were calloused, His fur had old scars hidden beneath the grime, but his eyes were alert, calm even. He didn't bark or growl anymore. He just watched the street with quiet patience. "I wonder where you came from," she said softly, "and how you knew." Meanwhile, at the hospital, a nurse entered the waiting area and called out Jace Peterson's family. A young woman stood up so quickly she nearly tripped. Her name was Emily, and her face was pale with fear, her hands trembling. "That's my son," she said, her voice cracking. "Is he okay? Please tell me he's okay." The nurse offered a small, reassuring smile. "He's stable, still unconscious, but we've given him fluids and brought his temperature down. You can see him." Tears streamed down Emily's face as she followed the nurse through the sterile corridors. The door to the room opened with a soft whoosh, and there was her little boy, small and still, but breathing. Machines beeped steadily. An IV bag hung beside him. His cheeks were still pink from the sun, but he no longer looked lifeless. Emily rushed to his side and grabbed his tiny hand. "Oh baby," she whispered, "I'm so sorry. I should have noticed sooner. I should have locked the door." A doctor entered behind her. He gave her a moment before speaking gently. "He's lucky. Another hour in that heat and we might have been looking at a much worse outcome." She looked up, confused. "How did you find him?" The doctor smiled faintly. "It wasn't us. A stray dog found him and alerted a neighbor. That dog likely saved your son's life." Emily stared at him, stunned. "A dog? Yes, a big one. From what I heard, stayed with your son until help arrived. Even followed the ambulance for a bit." She looked down at Jace again, holding his hand tighter. "I need to find that dog." That same dog, just 2 miles away, had moved on. After waiting on the sidewalk for what seemed like hours, he finally rose, stretched his legs, and began walking. He didn't go far, just down the alley behind the houses, past the overgrown fence, and toward the old shed near the abandoned lot. This was his spot, a place where no one bothered him, where he could sleep in peace. But that night, he didn't sleep. He curled up on a patch of dirt, facing the street, as if still on guard. And in that hospital room, under the watchful eyes of doctors and nurses, Jace stirred. His fingers twitched, his lips moved, and his eyes slowly opened. The following morning brought a gentle breeze to Brookdale, but there was tension in the air. The town was buzzing about the little boy who had been found on the sidewalk, and even more so about the stray dog who had refused to walk away. Who had once ignored him were now asking questions. Who was he? Where did he come from? How did he know the boy was in trouble? The dog, unaware of the talk surrounding him, woke from a light sleep in the abandoned lot. He yawned, shook the dust from his fur, and sniffed the wind. Something in him wouldn't let him stay hidden for long. He stood, stretched, and limped back toward the neighborhood. He didn't seem to be following a scent more like a feeling, a pull, as if he knew the child he had guarded wasn't out of danger yet. He passed the schoolyard, where children's laughter echoed, and crossed back into familiar territory. Some people walking their dogs stopped to glance at him. One person even reached into their bag for a snack, but the dog didn't stop. His attention was elsewhere. He returned to Pine Hollow Lane and sat in the same spot he had found Jace. The morning before, the trash bin was still there. The sidewalk was clean, but he didn't bark or search. He just sat down and looked around, his tail thumping slowly behind him. Across the street, Mrs. Collins saw him through her window and stepped outside. This time, she brought a small bowl of food and a fresh dish of water. She placed them near the curb and backed away. The dog watched her eyes, calm and curious, before walking over and sniffing the bowl. After a few bites, he sat beside her feet. "You've got something special in you," she said softly, crouching to meet his eyes. "You didn't just find that boy. You stayed. You made sure someone came. That's not something dogs just do." The dog didn't move, but his ears flicked at her words. Back at the hospital, Jace was recovering faster than anyone expected. His fever had gone down, and he was drinking fluids on his own. His mother never left his side, brushing his hair back, whispering how much she loved him, and kissing his hands every few minutes, as if afraid to lose him all over again. He was quiet most of the time, but when he did speak, it was soft and simple. "Dog," he said once, tugging her sleeve. "What, baby?" Emily asked. "The dog," he repeated. "He stayed with me." Her eyes welled with tears. "I know, sweetheart, and we're going to find him." Emily didn't wait long. That afternoon, she made a post online with a picture of her son and a message that read, To the dog who saved my little boy, anyone has seen this stray, please help me find him. He may not have a name, but he's our hero. The post spread like wildfire through the local Facebook groups and community apps. People began commenting almost instantly. I've seen that dog behind the old hardware store. He used to come by my house for scraps. Sweet boy. He was near the park last week. Meanwhile, the dog lay curled up in Mrs. Collins's yard, finally resting in a soft patch of grass under her oak tree. She had placed a blanket out, unsure if he'd use it, but he had. His eyes stayed half open, as if still waiting for something. That night, as the sky turned a deep navy blue, a car slowly rolled down Pine Hollow Lane. It stopped in front of Mrs. Collins's house. Emily stepped out, holding Jace close to her chest. The boy's eyes lit up when he saw the dog lying there, and he pointed with a tiny finger. "Mama," he whispered. "That's him." Emily stepped out of the car with Jace in her arms, her eyes immediately drawn to the scruffy figure lying under the tree. The dog didn't move at first. He just lifted his head slightly and blinked at them, calm and unafraid. Jace leaned forward, arms stretching out instinctively. "That's him," he said again, a whisper full of certainty. "That's the dog who stayed with me." Mrs. Collins stepped onto her porch, recognizing the young woman from the news. "Are you ... Jace's mum?" Emily nodded quickly. "Yes, ma'am. We saw your address in one of the online comments. Is this where the dog's been?" Mrs. Collins nodded slowly, looking down at the stray, now sitting up and watching the reunion with quiet curiosity. "He's been here most of the day. Didn't move from that spot until now." Emily walked over gently, her eyes never leaving. The dog Jace squirmed in her arms, and she crouched to let him closer. The dog looked at the little boy, tail twitching slightly. "Hi, buddy," Emily said softly. "You remember us, don't you?" The dog didn't bark or growl. He stepped forward and sniffed Jace's outstretched hand, then gently licked the boy's palm. Jace giggled and leaned his forehead against the dog's head without hesitation. "I think he does," Emily whispered. Mrs. Collins came down the steps and handed Emily a water bottle. "You're lucky, both of you," she said. "That dog howled like his heart was breaking when no one would listen. I only came out because I'd heard him before, but never like that." Emily looked at her gratefully. "Thank you for answering him. He saved my son." The dog sat down beside them, panting softly. His body still looked thin, but his eyes had softened. For once, he wasn't on alert. He wasn't bracing for someone to throw a rock or chase him away. "I don't know where he came from," Mrs. Collins added, "but there's no doubt in my mind he was meant to be there yesterday. He didn't just stumble across your boy. He stayed with him, barked until someone came. That takes more than instinct. That takes heart." As they sat on the lawn together, neighbors began to peek out from their homes, some recognizing the woman from the news, others just curious. A few people walked over, one with a bag of dog treats, another with a leash, unsure if they should help or back away. Emily stood, dusted off her jeans, and looked down at the dog. "We're going to take him with us, if that's okay." Mrs. Collins smiled. "He's not mine to give, but I don't think he'd mind." One of the neighbors, a teenage boy with a bike helmet in hand, approached slowly. He used to hang out near the gas station on Main. People called him Rusty because of that reddish patch on his back. Emily glanced down at the patch, brushing her hand gently across the dog's dusty fur. "Rusty, huh?" She turned to Jace. "What do you think, sweetie? Should we call him Rusty?" Jace nodded enthusiastically, hugging the dog again. "Rusty stayed with me." The name stuck instantly. They didn't have a leash, so Rusty simply followed them to the car. He jumped in the back seat like he belonged there. Emily strapped Jace into his car seat, then looked over her shoulder. Rusty was lying down already, his head resting near Jace's feet. "Looks like he's found his family," Mrs. Collins said from the porch, "and maybe a place to rest." Emily gave her a grateful smile. "Thank you for everything." "Really?" Mrs. Collins waved, watching the car pull away down the street. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of peace in her chest. She had listened when no one else did and, in doing so, helped a dog become a hero. And as Rusty rode away with his new family, tail wagging and eyes half closed, he didn't know what came next. But for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like a stray anymore. The first night in his new home, Rusty slept curled at the foot of Jace's bed. He didn't stir when the boy rolled in his sleep, or when the floor creaked under Emily's footsteps. After days, maybe even weeks, of sleeping in dirt and cold alleyways, he had found a quiet, soft place that smelled of safety and warmth. But Rusty's journey hadn't been easy, and neither had Jace's. Though the toddler was stable and on the road to recovery, doctors had warned Emily that there were still concerns. Extended sun exposure had left Jace dehydrated and fatigued, and the medical team continued to monitor him closely for signs of heat exhaustion complications. Emily barely slept, waking often to check if her son was breathing normally, watching every movement of his chest with a mother's quiet worry. Still, the presence of Rusty seemed to calm Jace in ways medicine couldn't. Every time the boy opened his eyes, he looked for the dog. When Rusty came close, Jace reached for him without hesitation. They had bonded during that critical moment on the sidewalk, and neither seemed ready to let go. Emily noticed it, too. She sat on the edge of Jace's bed that morning, her hand resting on Rusty's back. "I don't know how you found him," she whispered, "but I'm glad you did." The morning sunlight filled the room as Jace stirred awake, blinking sleepily before smiling at the dog. "Hi, Rusty," he murmured. The next few days were a blur of follow-up appointments, phone calls from concerned family members, and unexpected visits from neighbors offering food and toys. But most surprising of all was the growing media attention. A local reporter had heard about Rusty's act of heroism and reached out to Emily. "We'd love to feature this story," the woman said on the phone. "People could really use something uplifting right now." Emily hesitated. She wasn't someone who liked attention, especially after the terrifying experience of losing her child. But she also understood how powerful the story could be, just for Rusty, but for all the other animals like him who went unnoticed. She agreed. The news aired that weekend. The footage included a short interview with Emily, a few clips of Jace playing in the backyard, and shots of Rusty resting under the tree while Jace ran circles around him. "He's not just a stray," Emily had said into the camera. "He's a lifesaver. If he hadn't found my son when he did, I don't want to think about what might have happened." The segment ended with the reporter smiling into the lens, a reminder that heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they walk on four legs. Almost instantly, the story spread beyond Brookdale. Local shelters shared it. Animal rescue organizations posted it. Even a few state-level outlets picked it up. Donations poured into local rescues, and the Animal Control Office reported a sudden uptick in dog adoptions. But amidst all the attention, Rusty stayed the same. He didn't seem interested in fame or applause. He still wandered the house quietly, keeping one eye on Jace at all times. He followed the boy from room to room, sometimes resting beside his toys, other times curling up on the kitchen rug while Emily cooked. And one afternoon, while Emily was folding laundry, she looked over and saw Jace asleep on the couches, hand resting gently on Rusty's paw. Tears welled in her eyes again. He had once been a nameless stray, invisible to the world. Now, he was the heartbeat of her home. By the end of the week, Rusty was no longer just a dog in Brookdale. He had become a symbol of hope. Social media had picked up his story and spread it far beyond Texas. People from across the country were commenting on the viral posts, calling Rusty a guardian angel, a miracle in fur, even a hero sent from above. But with the attention came questions. Animal lovers, rescue groups, and even reporters began asking, where had Rusty come from? Was someone missing him? Had he once belonged to someone before life on the streets? Emily didn't know. All she knew was that he had found her son, saved his life, and had never once left his side since. But curiosity from the community grew, and she decided it was only fair to try to learn more. She took Rusty to the local vet for a full checkup and to see if he had a microchip. The veterinarian, a kind older man named Dr. Whitaker, ran his scanner gently over Rusty's back. The screen remained blank. "No chip," he said, shaking his head. "That means no owner came forward to register him. Might have never had one." Emily looked at Rusty, who sat calmly beside the exam table. No collar, no tags, no chip, nothing. "He's got a few old scars," the vet added, "likely from living rough. Probably been on his own for a while. But I'll tell you this, his heart sounds strong. You've got a healthy dog here, despite everything." That night, Emily posted again. "No chip, no owner. Rusty is officially part of our family. He's healthy, loyal, and still refuses to let Jace out of his sight." The response was overwhelming. "Bless this dog and your family. Please give him a big hug from all of us. He may not have had a past, but but now he has a future. Despite the emotional outpouring, something else began to happen. Several people claimed they had seen Rusty before. A woman from a nearby town messaged Emily privately and said she remembered a reddish dog who used to follow a man experiencing homelessness. According to her, the man had disappeared months ago after being hospitalized, and the dog had vanished not long after. Another person swore they'd fed Rusty behind the gas station near Route 6 and described how he always looked for someone, before lying down as if waiting for a friend who never came back. Emily followed up on the leads, but none could confirm a true identity or owner. What became clear, though, was that Rusty had spent a long time surviving, wandering from one town to the next. He had seen hardship, he had known hunger, and yet, when he found a child in need, he didn't hesitate. One night, as Emily watched Jace sleep beside Rusty, she realized something. Rusty had probably waited his whole life to matter to someone, to belong. And now, he had that dot. The following day, the local shelter contacted Emily with an idea. They wanted to honor Rusty at an upcoming community adoption event, not just to celebrate his heroism, but to inspire others to consider giving animals like him a second chance. Emily agreed, and the next weekend, Rusty attended his first public event at the fairgrounds. Families lined up to meet him. Children petted him. Adults took photos. A banner above the shelter booth read, "From Stray to Savior, Rusty's Story." Rusty didn't seem to mind the attention. He let people touch him. He stayed calm even around loud noises, but his eyes always drifted back to Jace, making sure the boy was close. Later that day, the shelter director approached Emily. "You know, we've had dozens of adoptions this week, all thanks to your dog." Emily smiled as Rusty lay at her feet. Jace curled beside him with a juice box in hand. "He's not just my dog," she said. "He's our miracle." And Rusty, as if understanding every word, let out a quiet, content sigh and fell asleep in the sun, at peace. The weeks that followed the adoption event were a whirlwind for Emily and her small family. Life had finally returned to something close to normal. Jace was back to his cheerful self, laughing more with each passing day, and Rusty had fully settled into his new role, not just as a pet, but as something more, a guardian, a best friend, and the quiet soul who had become the heart of the household. But even as things calmed down at home, the outside world had not forgotten Rusty's story. Local newspapers followed up with editorials. School children drew pictures of him with capes and medals. A teacher from Brookdale Elementary even invited Emily and Rusty to visit her class so the kids could meet a real-life hero. "Do you think he knew the boy was in danger?" one student asked. Emily smiled as Rusty gently licked Jace's fingers. "I think Rusty knew exactly what he was doing. Sometimes, animals sense things we don't." The classroom erupted in claps and cheers, and Rusty wagged his tail, clearly enjoying the attention. But beyond the happy moments, Emily found herself thinking more about Rusty's past. There was still so much she didn't know: how he'd ended up on the street, how long he'd been alone, and whether someone had once loved him and lost him. Late one evening, after Jace had fallen asleep, Emily sat on the porch with Rusty lying beside her. The stars shimmered above the quiet neighborhood, and the air was cool and still. "I wish I knew where you came from," she said quietly, stroking his fur. "But maybe it doesn't matter. You're here now. That's what counts." Rusty's eyes blinked slowly, and he leaned into her side. It was the softest gesture, but it spoke louder than any words. The next day brought an unexpected visitor. Mrs. Collins, the elderly neighbor who had first called 911 that fateful morning, knocked gently on the door. Emily welcomed her in with a warm hug. Surprised but glad to see her. "I found something you might want to see," Mrs. Collins said, handing over a small, weathered photograph. It showed a much younger Rusty, though thinner, and with slightly brighter fur, standing next to a man with a thick beard and a kind smile. The man was sitting on a park bench, his arm wrapped around the dog's neck. In the corner of the photo were the faded words, "Me and Rusty Houston, 2019. Emily looked up in shock. So his name really was Rusty. Mrs. Collins nodded. Apparently, a neighbor down the street used to volunteer at a shelter. She said the man in the photo was homeless, but always made sure Rusty had food before he ate himself. They were inseparable until he got sick and disappeared from town. Emily's heart tightened. "Do we know what happened to him?" "No one's sure, but someone must have taken that photo and passed it along. I thought you should have it." Emily stared at the photo for a long moment, then smiled. "Thank you. This means more than I can say." That night, she showed the picture to Jace. The little boy looked at the man and then at the dog now curled beside his toy basket. "That's Rusty," he said with a grin. "But now he's all rusty." Emily hung the photo in the hallway, right above Rusty's food bowl. It was a small way to honor the life he had before, the bond he'd once had, and the journey that led him to their doorstep. From that day forward, Rusty walked a little prouder. It was as if the missing piece of his story had finally clicked into place. He wasn't just a stray anymore. He had a name, he had a past, and more importantly, he had a forever home. A year had passed since the day Rusty found Jace on the sidewalk, and life in Brookdale had quietly returned to normal. But inside the Peterson home, nothing was quite the same. Not since Rusty came into their lives. The bond between the boy and the dog had only grown stronger. Wherever Jace went, Rusty was close behind. During story time, Rusty lay beside him, head resting on his paws. During meals, he curled under the table, content just to be near. And at night, when the house fell quiet, Rusty took his place at the foot of Jace's bed, standing guard like he always had. Emily often caught herself smiling at the sight. She'd gone from nearly losing her son to gaining something she never expected, a four-legged protector who had asked for nothing, yet given them everything. Word of Rusty's story continued to ripple far beyond Brookdale. He was invited as a guest of honor at a statewide animal rescue event in Austin. There, he was presented with a special medal for bravery, an honorary title rarely given to any dog, let alone a stray. The crowd at the event was huge. Emily stood beside the podium, holding Jace's hand while Rusty sat calmly at their feet, tail flicking lightly with curiosity. When Emily stepped up to speak, she kept it simple. "Rusty didn't just save my son's life," she said, voice steady but thick with emotion. "He taught us that no one, no matter how forgotten or overlooked, is without value. He may not have had a home before, but he had a purpose, and now, he's part of our family, forever." The audience rose in a standing ovation. Flashbulbs lit the air as Rusty looked around with mild confusion, then let out a small bark that sent the crowd into cheers. Later that evening, Jace climbed onto the stage steps with Rusty close behind. A local reporter asked if the boy remembered the day Rusty found him. "I don't remember much," Jace said honestly, "but I remember feeling safe. He stayed with me. That's what I remember most." It was simple, honest, and everyone in the crowd wiped at their eyes. In the following months, Emily began volunteering at the local animal shelter, inspired by Rusty's story and determined to help more dogs like him find loving homes. Jace often came along, and Rusty would calmly sit near the front desk, his presence soothing to nervous new arrivals. Children who were scared to be around dogs quickly warmed up to him. Volunteers began calling him the ambassador. Rusty never asked for attention, but he always gave it. He nudged shy hands until they found the courage to pet him. He lay beside crying kids until their sobs softened. He didn't have to do any of it, but he did. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the breeze carried the soft scent of summer grass, Emily watched Jace and Rusty running through the yard. Jace laughed as Rusty trotted behind him, ears flopping. With each bounce they paused under the oak tree, where Jace dropped to the ground and Rusty plopped beside him. The boy wrapped his arms around the dog's neck and whispered something only Rusty could hear. Emily stepped outside with a glass of lemonade and stood quietly on the porch, watching them. A soft ache of gratitude filled her chest. She had once feared she'd lose her son forever, but instead, she'd gained something remarkable. A reminder that love can come from the most unexpected places, that heroes don't always wear capes, and, sometimes, they walk the streets unnoticed until the moment they're needed most. Rusty lifted his head slightly, catching Emily's eyes from across the yard. For a second, they simply looked at each other, and in that silent moment, she knew. He understood exactly what he meant to all of them. He wasn't just the dog who saved her son. He was family. He was home.